Reconstruction. There are a lot of third single issue parties going on because everybody's got an opinion, okay? You had the Liberty Party, which was an abolitionist party, okay? You had all sorts of people out there that said different things, okay? One of these parties that formed were called the Free Soilers, okay? And guys, you've heard us talk about Free Soilers till you were sick of them, so you know who they are, okay? The Free Soilers, all they wanted to do was free soil for free white people, okay? When it came to slavery, their issue wasn't moral. Their issue is, how does it affect me? If you free the slaves, I got to compete against the former slaves for labor. I don't want to do that. If you free the slaves, they're going to come out west and compete for this free land. I don't want to do that. So, I may not like slavery, but I don't like the idea of slaves being freed. I want them kept in the South. So Free Soilers will support slavery, but because it keeps African Americans from competing with them for land and things like this, okay? During the Civil War, the Democrats are the party of the South, big time. And they are the dominant party. The fact that they're the party of the South is why later on they'll be known as the Solid South when they reemerge after the Civil War. The Democrats are the party of the South. It's the heart and soul of the Democratic Party because it's Jacksonian. And Jackson was a Southerner. It's Jeffersonian. Jefferson was a Southerner. Okay? When the war breaks out in the election of 1860 and the South secedes, the Democrats lose their soul. Okay? They are states' rights, non-compromising. These are the people that turned down the Crittenden Compromise. The most radical of them were known as fire eaters. They're the Cavalier class. They're the plantation owners. And they are radical. Guys, they don't believe in compromising because they believe we don't have to compromise. This country is supported on a cotton economy. We got the cotton. The Democratic Party is supported by us. We got the Democratic Party, okay? We don't have to do anything we don't want to do. And then when that panic of 1857 pops up that destroys industrial America, but doesn't phase Southern America, guys, they're convinced it's an act of God, okay? They are the party of nullification. When your political agenda is so strong that you can rip a nation in half, when you can rip 13 states out of a nation, you're strong, you're powerful, okay? And they work, right? They want the federal government to protect slavery. They don't want some state thing. They want a constitutional amendment that will protect slavery and the spread of slavery. That's their condition. If the federal government agrees to this, there's no civil war. And guys, they're not backing off of this. To them, there's no room for compromise. We want that fugitive slave law put in stone, and we want that more than anything else. We want to solve this problem about slavery once and for all. We want that amendment. Okay? All right. And that's what they want. They want to expand slavery. And in those areas where slavery may not be applicable, like Arizona, Utah, they want popular sovereignty to solve the issue. Also remember at this time that there are filibusters going into Latin America, like William Walker, that are trying to overthrow Latin American countries like Nicaragua to build a slave empire. Okay? We're going to try to sit here and buy Cuba from Spain to do the same thing. So the spread of slavery is not necessarily going west here. It's going into Mexico, into Latin America, into the Caribbean, okay? Because they're trying to expand the Cotton Empire, okay? In Reconstruction, they will come back, okay? They'll be decimated by the war. The Republican Reconstruction will come in and try to destroy them as a party. They'll sit back and bide their time, okay? Eventually, when Reconstruction comes to an end in 1876, that's when their day is here again. They'll reform and they will attempt and they will restore home rule in the South. These are the Bourbon Redeemers. Okay? So the pre-war Democrats are the post-war Bourbons. Okay? They didn't stay down long. When they reinstall home rule and everything, they'll grab the South and will not let go of it. Okay? They will become the solid South. They will once again become the major part of the Democratic Party. Okay? And they'll be there for a long, long time. Okay? Say what you want to about them, but they're resilient. You can knock them down, but they're not staying down. Okay? Is everybody good so far? Okay. The Republicans. You know, it's weird. You have to be born and raised in the South, and you have to have great-grandparents and grandparents that were born and raised in the South to appreciate this. Okay? My great-grandmother, she died at 103, but I remember talking to her a lot about that. And all the things that went on, she saw this stuff. She saw the Klan rallies and stuff like this. She was around African Americans. In fact, a couple lived behind her in northern Louisiana. And they were always talking about things like Jim Crow, black codes and stuff like this. It was a matter of fact. Okay? Very few black people were insulted by this. They just accepted their state because they had to. You either did that or you ended up strapped to a tree burned to death. Okay? And to listen to people talk about this time period, it was so matter of fact, it offends our sensibilities today. And it should. It should. But because it was so much a part of the fabric that was set down by home rule, people accepted it. That's why, during the Great Depression, that they would not surrender their segregation to Franklin Roosevelt. They would not. That's why they bolted from the party in 48 to form the Dixiecrats. This is the way we are, it's the way we've always been, and it's the way we're always going to be. Okay? If you want to use the word stubborn, that's a good one. Okay? Is everybody good so far? Okay. Republican Party, all right? They're the former Whigs. That conservative part of the Whigs will come back. Okay? Abraham Lincoln is the linchpin of the Republicans. He's the first Republican president. Okay? He was Henry Clay's protege. Clay took him under his wing. And Henry Clay was a reincarnation. Abraham Lincoln was a reincarnation of Henry Clay. He delivered Clay's eulogy. Remember, one thing that Henry Clay championed that Lincoln did was colonization. Okay? So he's a Henry Clay wannabe, which means everything that Clay stood for, Lincoln stood for, especially the American system. Guys, the North won the Civil War. That means that all of Lincoln's policies will stay in place, including the American system. Okay? The Free Soilers. When you see the term free soil, think yeoman. Think yeoman farmers. Okay? Remember at this time that the one possession that you can have that's always worth something is land. You are identified by your land ownership. It's who you are. And Lincoln is going to promise these people, I'm going to give you all the free land you want to. And he will. He'll offer 160 acres so they can farm it for 5 years. Okay? So the free soilers want that free land. They do not want to compete with former slaves. Make sure you understand that. That is the only aversion to slavery they have. They think it's evil. They think it's immoral. But they're looking after their economic well-being. And they're yeomen. Okay? They're not necessarily middle class. They're farmers. And they don't want to compete with former slaves for labor. The same as Irish in the northern cities don't want to compete with freed slaves for labor. That's the essence. That's the free part of the free soil agenda. Lincoln will be to the yeoman what Jackson was to the yeoman. Okay? Lincoln will be their guy. Lincoln's a yeoman. Okay? And Lincoln will pursue policies that benefit his constituency, which include free land. They will include things like the Transcontinental Railroad, the Morrill Land Grant Act, the Homestead Act. All of that is Lincoln being true to his constituents because it all involves free land and lots of it. Okay? They will be open to compromise, but only because that's what Clay does. Clay will be the author of the compromise of the Missouri Compromise, Compromise of 1850, and they will be the ones that will put together the Crittenden Compromise, designed to avert the Civil War. A major philosophical difference in these two, and guys, this goes back to Hamilton. Look at who is willing to compromise, and look at who is stubborn. That's an important part. That's an important thing. They are not compromising anything. Before the Civil War, why should we? Okay? After the Civil War, no. We're just going to do our thing. We're going to stay bottled up in the South, install home rule, and go about our business. Okay? So keep that in mind. Okay? Reconstruction, the radical Republicans are going to win this. Remember, there's a battle between the radical Republicans and presidential Reconstruction. They'll win it because John Wilkes Booth will shoot Lincoln. When you take Lincoln out of the picture, presidential Reconstruction loses all of its heart and soul. It loses its wind. Andrew Johnson can't pick that back up. So the radical Republicans will win Reconstruction. Radical Republicans will win Reconstruction. Okay? When Recon ends in 1876, okay, with that compromise, okay, the Republicans will control the North. Remember, Rutherford B. Hayes will be president. That's when you start the Gilded Age. And they will rule the Gilded Age. Okay? They'll be responsible for the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Collectively, these are known as the Civil War Amendments because you always address these as a package. Okay? The 13th Amendment relegates slavery illegal. It abolishes slavery. Okay? The 14th Amendment says that if you're a slave born in the United States, you're a citizen. It gives you citizenship. It gives you the rights of citizenship. Due process under law. Okay? The 15th Amendment gives you the vote. Here's why this is important. Okay? If you're the radical Republicans, guys, why do you want those 4 million former slaves on your side? What have they got that you want? Votes. Exactly. Okay? So the first thing you do is free these people. They're no good to you as slaves. So the first thing you do is free them. That's the 13th Amendment. Okay? The 14th Amendment. They can't vote if they're not citizens. So you make them citizens. And you promise them due process under law. Okay? By passing the 14th. Remember, it overturns the Dred Scott decision. And the Dred Scott decision says a slave has no rights a white man's bound to respect. That's why they award them with due process under law the 14th. Now that they're free, and now that they're citizens, now you give them the right to vote. That's the 15th. So these three things were put together, if you ask the question why, was to get that 4 million person voting bloc. That's why these amendments were passed. Guys, no one in the United States cares about the welfare of former slaves at this time. They wouldn't even keep on funding the Freedmen's Bureau to help them after the war. The only reason these things were passed because 4 million former slaves represent a major voting bloc. Okay? That's important. Know the ulterior motive. Okay? Is everybody good so far? Okay? Remember this. What's the one thing they did not count on that hurt them? Guys, you can give someone the right to vote, but they still got to go cast the vote. They didn't count on people wearing bed sheets and pointy hats. They didn't count on people in the South that would restrict their right to vote through violence. The Klan, the Knights of the White Camellia, the White League, and things like that. So these things will be ineffective as long as there are barriers to black voting in the South. Okay, is everybody good with that? Okay. Okay. That's why, and please listen to this, that's why the election of 1876 is so important. When that election comes about, the compromise to end that election is Reconstruction will be ended. When Reconstruction is ended, the troops leave the South. Blacks have no one to protect them. Remember we talked in class, this is when living hell starts for black people? That's because the troops leave the South. Okay? They're like babes in the woods. And there's no way they're going to be able to go down and vote, okay, if there's no one protecting them. Okay? Guys, look what that does. If you keep the black vote out of the South, that means that they will get their power and they will keep their power. So they have a reason for wanting to keep blacks from voting, to retain power. And they did. That's why the Bourbons and later on the Dixiecrats want to protect segregation. You protect segregation, you keep blacks from voting, you solidify your hold on the South. Guys, that's important stuff because, guys, politics is all about a game. It's all about people manipulating things. And this is how they manipulate it. So these right here are landmark amendments and things. But as to their effectiveness, okay, they were extremely ineffective in the South because they held all the cards. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Any questions about this real quick? Okay. The Military Reconstruction Act is how they protected the black vote. As long as troops are in the South, blacks will be able to vote. You'll start having black congressmen, black governors, okay? And the reason is those 4 million blacks are going to vote, okay? But as soon as the election of 1860 rolls around and Rutherford B. Hayes assumes the presidency and gives Samuel J. Tilden what he wants in exchange, Tilden wants that gone. And as soon as that leaves, that's when everything changes in the South. Okay. Is everybody good? Guys, does this make sense to everybody? I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot to remember, but it's important to understand the machinations going underneath. There's a reason, especially something like this. Conventional wisdom is one of these are the 3 most important amendments to the Constitution. Okay? They are important. They freed 4 million people. Okay? The 14th Amendment today is probably the most important amendment to the Constitution. Because it's not about blacks anymore. It's about other people whose civil rights are being violated. Okay? But at the time they were passed, in the context of Reconstruction, okay, they were ineffective. Because you can free the slaves, make them citizens, give them the right to vote. But if they cannot get to the voting booth, it does no good. And when they leave the South in 1876, blacks cannot get to the voting booth. Okay? That's why they're going to come to power and hold on to it. Yes?
So they supported like a free soil agenda. Why would they also support the amendments to free the black?
You mean after the war? Okay. After the war, slavery is illegal. Okay? But that's the first thing to free the slaves. Okay? So it's not a matter of freed slaves, but they're already free. Okay? So the free soilers, their faction will pretty much come all to pieces. They're going to have to compete with blacks. Remember we talked about sod busters and exodusters? Okay? That's who they were. Okay? Those were blacks that were going out west. So the free soilers lost that battle. They're going to have to. But when you fight the war and you tell the American people in the in the Emancipation Proclamation that it's a war, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, we're going to free the slaves. Once you get to a point, you pretty much have to. Okay? And Lincoln did. Okay? Lincoln, and especially radical Republicans, these were passed by the radicals. They're the ones that won those 4 million votes. Okay? Okay, is everybody?